I don't have a lot of fears. I have the normal fear of passing away. You know, I guess we all think about that.
What if I told you that a Hollywood legend, a man whose name was heard in every corner of the world for decades, was hiding something no one was supposed to know about? Gene Hackman. Legendary actor, two-time Oscar winner, a man who won millions of hearts with his roles. His image is forever imprinted in cinema. He could be a brutal criminal, principled detective, stern sheriff, or charismatic villain, but he was always real. His departure from Hollywood in 2004 left behind more questions than answers. Why did he suddenly disappear? What caused him to abandon his career at the height of his fame? Time passed, and Hackman himself became a ghost to the industry. No interviews, rare public appearances, absolute silence. Until one day, years later, the silence was not broken. In February 2025, the world was shocked by the news. Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found dead in their home in Santa Fe. Official sources reported strange circumstances. The door of their house was ajar, the bodies had been in the room for more than a day, and their dog, for some reason, was locked in a cage.
Breaking news, you're looking at video of one of the last times Oscar winner Gene Hackman, a known recluse in recent years, was seen in public. As we're learning incredible new details this hour about the circumstances surrounding his death. His front door open, scattered pills on the bathroom countertop, one dog dead in the closet, two still alive on the property. 95-year-old Hackman and his wife, a 63-year-old classical pianist, their German Shepherd dog, all of them tonight mysteriously dead. The police right now are ruling out a carbon monoxide. This frantic 911 call captured the moment they were found.
The first hypotheses were shocking. Possible poisoning, an accident, or maybe something much more sinister. But then investigators made a discovery that turned the case upside down. Doctors discovered that Hackman's heart had stopped beating 9 days before he was found. But how is that possible? Why hadn't anyone noticed their disappearance? And what really happened inside the walls of that house? The strangest part began afterward. When fans and co-workers spoke up, there was something in their words that no one expected. Among them was Freeman, Hackman's longtime friend, a man who knew him perhaps better than anyone. It was he who took the stage at the 97th Academy Awards in 2025 to say what no one dared to say out loud.
Inside, deputies found the couple's bodies in different rooms and say they appeared to have been there for some time. Hackman in a mudroom, his wife in a bathroom near a space heater, with an open prescription bottle on the counter and pills scattered around. Deputies say she had obvious signs of death and body decomposition. 2 healthy dogs were also found on the property, with a third found dead near Arakawa's body. Officials did not find any signs of forced entry. The fire department and gas company didn't find any obvious signs of a gas leak or carbon monoxide. A sheriff's office spokesperson says the cause of death has not been confirmed, but it is not believed to be foul play.
His speech had the room in stupor. He wasn't just remembering Hackman as a friend and colleague. He was hinting at something more, a story beyond the usual, a truth that's been kept from us all these years. And if his words are true, then the view of Gene Hackman, his life and even his death will never be the same again. Who was this man really? What happened behind the closed doors of his home? Why does his name raise so many questions again? Today we will reveal to you the secret that Hollywood preferred to keep silent about. Are you ready to know the truth? Then buckle up, because the story is just beginning. Gene Hackman. A name you can't say without respect. A man whose roles have forever entered the history of cinema, who not just played characters but brought them to life, turning each movie into something more than just a picture on the screen. His charisma, deep emotionality, the ability to convey complex feelings with a slight movement of the eyebrow or barely noticeable smile, all this made him one of the brightest figures in Hollywood. But few people thought about what was behind this external brilliance, what demons tormented the actor, and why he suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only a legend.
More now on our breaking news about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths of legendary film actor Gene Hackman, his wife, and a dog that authorities have called suspicious, including the reported condition of Hackman's and his wife's bodies and what an affidavit calls mummification in both hands and feet.
For a long time, it seemed that Hackman's career was perfect. Born in 1930, went through a difficult youth, served in the Marines, and then found himself in acting, making his way to fame with incredible tenacity. In 1967, his role in Bonnie and Clyde brought him his first Oscar nomination, and then it went like butter. The French Connection, The Conversation, Unforgiven, one cult movie replaced another. Hackman was that rare actor who could reincarnate in any character, but remain himself. He had a gift for making even the most ambiguous roles human. He could play a killer, villain, cruel boss, but the viewer still saw him as a man. However, outside the screen he was complex, withdrawn, often sharp. In Hollywood about him rumors, he could burst on the set, bring the director a white heat, easily go into himself, and do not talk to anyone for several days. Wes Anderson, who shot it in the family Tannenbaum, admitted that working with Hackman was a nightmare and the greatest success at the same time. He did not tolerate amateurs, hated superficiality, could stop the take if one of the actors underperformed, and calmly say to his face all that he thinks about it. He did not play, he lived in the frame, recalled Clint Eastwood, and if you did not meet his level, you were hard. But the older he got, the more Hollywood seemed foreign to him. In 2004, when he was 74, he suddenly announced the end of his career. No high-profile press conferences, no farewell tour of shows, no final movie that would become his swan song. He just walked away. The only reason he voiced in a rare interview was, "I'm tired." It was later revealed that the decision was not easy for him. His heart was not in the best shape even then, and the industry, in which he spent almost 60 years, was getting further and further away from him. Hackman could not tolerate the fact that the movie was turning into a marketing product, where the important thing is not the depth of the characters and collections in the first weekend. But there was another factor he never talked about publicly. His closest friends knew. Hackman had a secret, something he couldn't forget. The talk was that he didn't just walk away, he ran away. And when his body was found in a house in Santa Fe in 2025, many of those who knew him felt his death was not just a tragic accident. Over the years of living in seclusion, he had virtually disappeared from public view. He was occasionally seen in small Santa Fe stores where he bought newspapers, or at gas stations as he drove out in his old Ford. He lived with his wife Betsy, a former pianist who had been by his side since the 90s. They had 3 dogs, a small house filled with books, paintings and memories. He was hardly ever written about in the press because he didn't give a reason. He just lived. But something still bothered him. In the last years of his life, neighbors noticed strange things. Hackman became withdrawn, almost never left the house. Sometimes the light in his windows burned all night, and sometimes he just disappeared for days. A former journalist who once tried to interview him said that Hackman met him at the doorstep, silently looked into his eyes and said, "I won't say anything, not now," and closed the door. When his body was found, the first thing that raised questions was the condition of the house. All the clocks in the room were stopped at different times, as if someone had deliberately turned them off. On the kitchen table was a scribbled piece of paper with dates and strange notes. His wife was found in the bathroom, next to scattered pills. And in one of the rooms, the television was on, playing an old western, the same one where he had played one of his first roles. Morgan Freeman, one of his old friends, later said, "Gene was a man who always knew something. Sometimes I thought he saw more than the average person was allowed to see." There were rumors in Hollywood that Hackman had reasons for avoiding publicity, that he didn't just leave because of fatigue or illness. Something was weighing on him. The official cause of death was never announced. Initially, there was talk of a heart attack, but the autopsy didn't give a definitive answer. There were too many strange details. There were no signs of forced entry in the house, but his body was found in the hallway, as if he was in a hurry to get somewhere. His dog was locked in a cage, though Hackman never did that. And strangest of all, data from his pacemaker showed that his heart had stopped beating 9 days before his body was discovered. The story raised dozens of questions that no one could answer. Some thought it was an accident. Others thought it was more than that. But one thing is certain, Gene Hackman left his life as mysteriously as he disappeared from Hollywood 20 years ago, and his story is far from over. When Gene Hackman left Hollywood in 2004, it seemed like the quiet but deliberate move of a man who was tired of the industry. He gave a short explanation: stress, fatigue, health, but those who knew him intimately felt there was something more behind it. In the last years of his career, he began to avoid public events, rarely agreed to interviews, and on the set often withdrew into himself, as if thoughts of something else occupied him more than the process of making a movie. In Hollywood, rumors that he tried to break some ties, leave behind something that haunted him all his life. But what exactly it was about, no one knew for sure. After leaving the movie, he moved to Santa Fe, a city in which it was easy to get lost, to hide from unnecessary attention. Together with his wife Betsy, he lived in seclusion, completely removed from his former life. In the rare interviews he gave at the beginning of his seclusion, he talked about how he enjoyed the simple things: fishing, reading, writing. Yet even in those interviews, there was something that was haunting. He never talked about the past, about his roles, about Hollywood, about co-workers. It seemed that he wanted to erase this stage of life, to leave it outside of his current existence. Neighbors noticed that over the years he became more and more withdrawn. Where once he could be found in small stores, walking his dog or driving his old pickup truck, in recent years he was no longer seen at all. In an interview, his friend, writer Daniel Lenihan, said that Hackman sometimes called him in the middle of the night, just to talk. Sometimes he would start with a joke, but then suddenly get serious, talking about how fast time was flying, how strange it was to see the world changing, and how he felt like something was coming. Lenihan did not pay much attention to these words at the time, but now, after his death, these conversations took on an ominous tone. The official version was that on February 26, 2025, during a routine visit, workers performing maintenance on Hackman's home noticed that the door to his house was ajar. They knocked for several minutes, calling his name, but there was no response. One of the workers looked out the window and saw a body lying motionless in the hallway. That's when the police were called. What officers arrived on the scene found raised more questions than answers. Hackman was lying on the hallway floor, dressed in his home clothes. Next to him was an overturned chair. His wife, Betsy, was found in the other room. She was in the bathtub with scattered pills lying next to her. One of their dogs was found dead in a cage, the other two wandering around the house. At first, it was thought the cause of death might have been carbon monoxide poisoning, but a check of the gas lines revealed nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, nothing missing. The weirdest part came later. Data from Hackman's pacemaker showed that his heart had stopped on February 17th, 9 days before his body was found. But how could that be possible? Did someone visit him after his death? Or had his wife been alive all this time and not called for help? The investigation began to take on new details. At first, the police were looking into natural causes. Doctors knew that Hackman had heart problems. He underwent angioplasty back in 1990, and in recent years his condition worsened. However, the fact that the bodies had been lying around for so long without anyone knowing about it led detectives to consider other theories. One of them was a deliberate suicide. Evidence found in the house, pills, open bottles of alcohol, could point to that. But friends and acquaintances assured that despite his reticence, he did not look like a person inclined to such a decision. The investigation also examined a strange detail, a notebook found in the house. It contained notes made in the weeks before his death. Some of the pages had strange dates on them, with no explanation. One of the last entries read, "They said it was time." Who were they, and what was the time? When this became known, many people began to recall oddities in Hackman's behavior in recent years. He hardly ever left the house, refusing visitors. His old friends, including Morgan Freeman, said that he became extremely suspicious. Even during telephone conversations, he spoke evasively, often paused, as if listening to see if someone else was listening. Freeman later admitted that shortly before Hackman's death, he called him late at night. Their conversation lasted only a couple minutes. Hackman didn't say anything specific, but there was concern in his voice. "Just know that things aren't what they seem," he uttered and hung up. Since the bodies were discovered, police have been trying to figure out what happened in the last few days of their lives. Betsy was last seen at the store about a week before the estimated date. She seemed calm, talking to the clerk about the weather. No signs of anxiety. But then they seemed to disappear. No calls, no texts, no attempt to contact anyone. When the case hit the press, there were many theories. Some believed it was a tragic accident. Perhaps Hackman died first, and his wife, unable to bear the loneliness, followed him. Others put forward a darker hypothesis related to his sudden departure from Hollywood 20 years ago. Whatever the case, one thing remained inconstant: the mystery that shrouded the last years of Hackman's life did not dissipate even after his death. There were more questions than answers, and despite the official statements of the investigation, many were sure this story is far from as simple as they try to present it. When Hollywood loses one of its greatest actors, the world freezes to pay its respects. But Gene Hackman's death has caused not only grief but also endless questions. His name has always been associated with charisma, impeccable acting, a tough character, and that ineffable screen presence that cannot be faked. After his departure in 2004, many wondered why he suddenly decided to break away from the industry that made him a legend. But no one expected that 2 decades later, Hackman would be back in the spotlight, only now no longer as an actor, but as a figure in a mysterious case where the questions far outweighed the answers. Morgan Freeman was one of the few people who could call Hackman not only a colleague but a true friend. Their acquaintance began long before Hollywood fame, back in theater circles, when they were both young actors who dreamed of the big stage. Their careers developed in different ways, but fate brought them together again and again. They worked together in the legendary movie Unforgiven, where Hackman played the brutal Sheriff Daggett and Freeman, a former mercenary who decided to walk away from violence. This work strengthened their respect for each other, and years later they crossed paths again in the thriller Under Suspicion. In Hollywood, rumors that Hackman always reached out to Freeman because he saw him as a man who, like him, did not tolerate the empty game and Hollywood falsity. They rarely appeared together in public, but always talked about each other with special warmth. That's why when at the 97th Oscar ceremony in 2025 Morgan Freeman rose to the stage, the hall froze. No one knew what he was going to say, but one thing was clear: it wouldn't just be a formal obituary. He began with simple words: "We didn't just lose an actor, we lost the truth." At that moment, there was absolute silence in the audience. Freeman was not known for letting his emotions get the best of him, but there was more than grief in his voice. He talked about how Hackman taught him to be honest on camera, how he said, "Don't act, just be." He recalled how tough he was on set, how he didn't tolerate shoddy acting and could lose his temper if he saw insincerity. But then Freeman did something no one expected. He talked about Hackman's last phone call, the very night Gene had called him, and said the cryptic words, "Things are not what they seem." Freeman admitted that from that moment on, he couldn't stop thinking about the meaning of those words. What exactly did Hackman mean? Was he talking about his life, about Hollywood, or about something bigger? After Freeman's speech, discussions erupted online. People began to revisit old Hackman interviews, looking for hidden hints in them. Someone recalled that in one of the rare conversations in 2012, he said, "I don't regret leaving. It was necessary." No one paid attention to the phrase at the time, but now it has taken on a new connotation. In the background of these words, new testimonies began to emerge. Family friends recalled that in recent years, Betsy Arakawa, Hackman's wife, often said he was hiding something. She tried to distract him from these thoughts, keeping him occupied with puzzles, suggesting he take up yoga to keep him occupied. But in recent months, his condition had changed. He almost stopped talking, sat for hours in his office, writing something down in his notebook. Soon began to talk, and other colleagues. Clint Eastwood in an interview admitted that Hackman was too honest for Hollywood. He knew the rules of the game, but he didn't want to play it, he said. Francis Ford Coppola, who worked with him on The Conversation, recalled that Hackman always kept to himself, did not like social events, did not seek fame. He was the kind of actor who didn't need recognition. He was just doing his job, Coppola said. But even among the many warm words, there were those who didn't hold back the truth. Bill Murray, who worked with Hackman on The Tenenbaum Family, said he was a difficult man. He could piss off any director, he could be rude, he could get angry if things were going wrong. Wes Anderson, the director of the movie, once admitted that working with him was a real challenge. But there was one episode that no one talked about publicly. It wasn't until after his death that something unexpected came to light. In 2001, a bizarre incident occurred in Los Angeles. Hackman got into a fight with a homeless man who, as it later turned out, was a man he had once helped. The incident was hushed up, but the police report stated that the argument started because of some old promises that Hackman allegedly failed to fulfill. The homeless man yelled something after him before getting punched in the face. Now that it was all starting to come together, it felt like Hackman was really trying to hide something important. And even in death, the questions didn't go away. Why had he been acting this way in recent years? What was he talking about in his last phone call to Freeman? Why was there always an aura of mystery surrounding his life? When Hackman's body was found in the Santa Fe house, there was a note on his desk. It was terse, almost dry. "I've done all I can. Now it's time." Investigators didn't pay much attention to it, but many of those who knew him are sure it was a message. The only question is to whom it was addressed.